I used to believe in forever. In the kind of love that withstands storms, that bends but never breaks. I thought I had that with Daniel. We were the couple people envied, the kind that finished each other's sentences, the kind that made single friends roll their eyes. Our love was full of laughter, late-night whispers, shared dreams, and the kind of intimacy that made the world feel small, like it was just us and nothing else mattered. But love is not a shield. Love does not protect you from betrayal. Maybe I should have seen the signs earlier. The slow, creeping distance. The way he started to turn away in bed, leaving a cold space between us. The growing absence of his smile when he looked at me, as if I had become something familiar but no longer exciting. At first, I convinced myself it was work stress. He was always ambitious, always pushing himself harder than necessary. It's just a phase, I told myself when he began coming home later, smelling of something that wasn't mine, faint traces of perfume too delicate for my usual scent. The real breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I remember the exact moment my world cracked. It wasn't a loud explosion. No dramatic revelation. Just silence, sharp, suffocating silence. He was in the shower, and his phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't the type to check his messages. I never had a reason to. But that night, something in me, some quiet, aching instinct, reached for the phone before I could stop myself. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it. And there it was. The truth, staring back at me in bold, cruel letters. A text message. A name I didn't recognize. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I felt my stomach drop. My hands turned ice cold. I reread it over and over, as if the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something innocent. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a work colleague being playful. Maybe. No. I knew better. The gut-wrenching, suffocating dread in my chest told me I knew better. I heard the water stop in the bathroom. The familiar sound of the shower door sliding open. My body locked up, panic creeping in. My first instinct was to put the phone down and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But something inside me snapped. I turned the phone toward the bathroom door and waited. Seconds later, Daniel walked out, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist, his wet hair dripping onto his shoulders. He was humming to himself, oblivious, carefree. And then he saw me. His gaze flickered to the phone in my hand. His smile faltered, just for a second. And in that second, I knew. There was no misunderstanding. No innocent explanation. No way to erase what I had just read. His face paled, but he quickly masked it with a casual shrug. Hey, babe. What's up? I didn't speak. Couldn't. I just turned the phone toward him, showing him the message. The room went still. Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. It's not what you think. That was the first lie. The first insult to my intelligence. I laughed, sharp, bitter. Then what is it? A pause. A flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Annoyance? Fear? It's complicated, he said finally. A second lie. My fingers curled tightly around the phone, my nails pressing into my palm. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I felt sick. Who is she? My voice came out steady, but I was barely holding myself together. Another pause. Too long. Just someone I work with. The third lie. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Are you sleeping with her? Silence. And in that silence, I found my answer. A part of me had hoped, desperately, foolishly, that he would deny it. That he would fight for us. That he would fall to his knees and tell me it was all a mistake. That he still loved me. But he didn't. Instead, he looked away. I felt something inside me break. The world I had built around us, the laughter, the late-night whispers, the shared dreams, began to crumble. And I realized, in that moment, that the man standing in front of me wasn't the same man I had fallen in love with. Or maybe he was. Maybe I had just never seen him clearly before. My hands trembled as I placed the phone down on the nightstand. My voice, when I spoke, was eerily calm. "How long?" Daniel exhaled. "A few months." Months. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My knees nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stay upright. He had been lying to me for months. Kissing me. Holding me. Making love to me while sneaking off to be with someone else. I thought I would cry. Scream. Throw something. But the tears didn't come. The rage didn't explode. Instead, a slow, cold numbness spread through me. I nodded, as if I had just been given a diagnosis. One I had no choice but to accept. Then I turned and walked toward the bedroom door. "Where are you going?" His voice followed me, uncertain, nervous. I paused. Just for a second. And then, without looking back, I said, "Anywhere but here." Then I left. I don't remember getting into my car. I don't remember driving. All I remember is the way my hands trembled on the steering wheel, the cold weight in my chest pressing down until I could barely breathe. The streetlights blurred past me, glowing in the darkness, but I had nowhere to go. I should have gone to my parents' house. My mother would have taken one look at me and known something was wrong. She would have wrapped me in a hug, stroked my hair like she did when I was a child, and told me I was stronger than this. But I wasn't ready to hear that. Not yet. So instead, I drove aimlessly, circling the same streets over and over, trying to silence the deafening thoughts in my head. Months. Daniel had been lying to me for months. How many times had I kissed him goodbye while he was already thinking of her? How many times had he come home smelling of her perfume, of her skin, while I waited for him, trusting, oblivious? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The betrayal sat heavy in my gut, festering like poison. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I glanced at it, already knowing who it was. Daniel. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. I finally pulled over on the side of a quiet road and picked up the phone with shaking hands. "Daniel, please come back. Let's talk." I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. Talk? About what? About how he had destroyed us? About how he had taken everything we had built together and burned it to the ground for some fleeting thrill? I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to hurl my phone out the window. Instead, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed. "Me, why?" A few seconds later, the 3 little dots appeared on the screen. He was typing. I held my breath. "Daniel, I messed up. But I love you. I don't want to lose you." I almost laughed. The sheer audacity of those words. He loved me? Was that what love was to him? Lies whispered in the dark? Deception hidden behind a kiss? I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat and leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. I closed my eyes, letting the silence wrap around me, but there was no comfort in it. Only the crushing weight of everything I had lost. And the growing ember of something dark, something new, burning beneath my skin. I had spent years building a life with him, trusting him. And he had thrown it all away like it meant nothing. But I wasn't going to be the only one suffering. No. I wasn't done with him yet. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. The thought of stepping inside that house, our house, made my stomach twist. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the walls, every inch of that place had been built with love, filled with memories of us. And now, all I could see was the lie beneath it. The betrayal woven into every moment we had shared. so I kept driving. The city blurred around me, neon signs and streetlights casting shadows that felt too long, too distorted. The world outside was still moving, people going on with their lives, laughing in restaurants, holding hands in the glow of passing headlights. How many of them were like me? How many were living in blissful ignorance, trusting someone who had already betrayed them? I felt sick. Eventually, exhaustion forced me to stop. I found myself in front of a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions, where the walls were paper thin, and the air smelled of old regrets. It was fitting. The receptionist barely looked up as I handed over my card. "Room 112, he muttered, sliding the key across the counter. I nodded, took it, and made my way down the dimly lit hallway. The carpet was worn, stained with things I didn't want to think about. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the room was exactly what I expected: faded curtains, an old television bolted to the wall, a bed that felt too stiff and too hollow. I locked the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. Daniel had texted me again. "Daniel, please come back. Let's talk." I stared at the words, my breath uneven. Talk? About what? About how he had taken everything I had given him and thrown it away like it meant nothing? About how I had been sleeping beside a stranger for months, loving someone who had already left me in every way that mattered? I wanted to smash my phone against the wall. Instead, I unlocked it. I didn't respond. I just scrolled up. Through all the messages, all the "I love you" texts, all the late-night calls when he told me he missed me while he was away for work. Had he been with her then? Had she been lying beside him while he told me I was the only one? I swallowed hard, my throat burning. I had never believed myself to be the kind of woman who sought revenge. I had always thought I was stronger than that I could walk away with dignity, my head held high. But now? Now I didn't want to be the bigger person. Now, I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel the way I felt, unsteady, hollowed out from the inside, drowning in the weight of something he couldn't fix. I stared at my reflection in the dusty motel mirror. My face looked unfamiliar, my eyes darker, my lips pressed into a thin, cold line. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who had loved Daniel so freely, so completely. That version of me was gone. And in her place was someone new. Someone who wasn't done yet. I picked up my phone again, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. If Daniel thought I would crumble, that I would come crawling back to him, begging for answers, he was wrong. No, I was going to make him believe I still wanted him. That I still loved him, still needed him. I was going to make him think he had a second chance. And when he least expected it, I was going to ruin him. I exhaled slowly, a bitter smile curling at the edges of my lips. Let the games begin. The next morning, I woke up to the dull ache of exhaustion behind my eyes. Sleep had come in fragments, slipping through my fingers before I could fully grasp it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. I imagined her body curled against his, imagined him whispering to her the way he once whispered to me. I swallowed against the bitterness rising in my throat. I had spent the entire night trying to piece myself back together, to figure out what came next. And in the end, the answer had been clear: I wasn't going to let this break me. I wasn't going to be the woman who cried herself to sleep every night while he got to move on unscathed. No. If Daniel wanted a clean break, if he thought he could step away from this without consequences, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone. "Daniel, I haven't slept. I just keep thinking about us." I stared at the message, debating whether to send it. It was exactly the kind of thing he'd expect to hear from me. Soft. Vulnerable. A woman who still believed in him, in love, in second chances. I hit send. The response was almost immediate. "Daniel, I feel the same way, baby. Please, can we talk? I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my nails dug into my palm. Me, okay. But not over the phone. I need to see you. Another pause. Then. Daniel, of course. Tonight? Our place? Our place. As if it still belonged to both of us. As if it hadn't been tainted by his betrayal. Me, okay. 8 o'clock. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Tonight would be the first move. The hours crawled by. I went home in the afternoon, stepping inside the house that no longer felt like mine. The air smelled the same, clean linen, faint traces of Daniel's cologne lingering in the fabric of our couch, but everything felt off. Like I was standing in the ruins of something that had already burned down. I moved through the room slowly, taking in the details I had never paid attention to before. The framed photos on the walls. The books on the shelves, some of them mine, some his. The little notes I had once left for him, still stuck to the fridge. I pulled one off, my own handwriting staring back at me. Miss you, can't wait for dinner tonight. Love you. I let out a shaky breath and crushed the note in my fist. How many of these had I written while he was with her? The anger came back, white-hot and blinding. But I forced myself to swallow it down. Tonight wasn't about rage. It wasn't about screaming or throwing things or demanding answers that wouldn't change anything. Tonight was about control. I went upstairs and changed into something simple, a soft sweater, a pair of jeans. Something comfortable, something familiar. I needed to look like her, the woman he thought he could still have. Then I sat on the couch, waiting. At exactly 8:03, I heard his key in the lock. The sound sent a ripple of something sharp down my spine, but I didn't move. The door opened, and then he was there. Daniel. For a moment, we just looked at each other. His hair was messy, like he had been running his hands through it all day. His eyes were tired, filled with something that might have been regret. He looked different. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. Hey, he said, voice soft. You're here. I nodded. I am. He stepped inside hesitantly, as if afraid one wrong move would shatter whatever fragile thing existed between us. I let the silence stretch between us before I finally spoke. Tell me the truth, Daniel. My voice was steady, even. How long? He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. Don't lie. He swallowed hard, then looked away. 6 months. I felt something inside me crack, but I didn't let it show. 6 months. Half a year. 180 days of deception. I forced myself to nod. Why? Daniel flinched. I don't know. That's not good enough. His jaw clenched, his fingers tightening into fists at his sides. I was stupid. I was selfish. I convinced myself it didn't mean anything. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. Didn't mean anything? I swear to you, it was never about love. He looked at me then, eyes desperate. I never stopped loving you. I tilted my head, studying him. 6 months of betrayal. And now he wanted to talk about love. I let out a slow breath and reached for his hand. He stiffened at first, surprised, but then his fingers curled around mine. Warm. Familiar. I lifted my eyes to meet his. I want to believe you, I whispered. And for a moment, I almost saw relief flicker across his face. But he had no idea. I wasn't here to forgive. I was here to destroy. Daniel's fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment, I let him believe it meant something. That I was soft. That I was vulnerable. That I was the same woman who had once loved him so fiercely she would have forgiven anything. I wasn't. Not anymore. I pulled my hand away gently, as if it took effort, as if I was still wading through my pain and doubt. Daniel's expression flickered: hope, hesitation, guilt. He had no idea he was already trapped in my web. Why now? I asked, my voice quiet, raw. Why are you here, Daniel? His shoulders slumped slightly. Because I realized what I was about to lose. I let out a soft breath, shaking my head. No. That's not it. He blinked. What? I tilted my head, studying him like he was a puzzle I had already solved. If she had been the one, if you truly wanted her, you wouldn't be here. I took a step closer, watching the way his jaw tightened. You're here because you lost control. Because I walked away first. Daniel looked away, exhaling sharply. That's not true. I smiled, just barely. Isn't it? I let the silence settle between us, let him sit in his discomfort. He wanted me to be soft, to be forgiving. But I wanted him unsteady, unraveling. He swallowed hard, shaking his head. I don't want to lose you. I laughed then, a quiet, humorless sound. You already did, Daniel. The words landed between us, sharp as broken glass. I could see it in the way he tensed, in the flicker of panic in his eyes. Good. I stepped back, giving him space to squirm. Tell me about her. His brows furrowed. What? The woman you ruined us for. I folded my arms across my chest. Tell me about her. He hesitated. I told you, she didn't mean anything. Then it should be easy. His lips parted, but no words came. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head, the calculations, the excuses he wanted to reach for. I waited. Finally, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Her name is Olivia. Olivia. The name landed in my mind like a stone thrown into dark water. She works with you? I asked, keeping my voice even. Yes. I nodded slowly, taking in the way his shoulders tightened, the way his fingers twitched at his sides. And she thought she loved you. Daniel flinched. I had hit a nerve. She thought she could take my place, I murmured, watching him closely. And you let her believe it. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I was never going to leave you. I let my lips curve into the faintest smirk. You didn't have to. She thought you already had. His gaze snapped to mine, guilt flickering behind his eyes. You let her believe you were hers, I continued, my voice quiet but unrelenting. You let her build a fantasy in her mind. And now that I've left you, she probably thinks she's one. Daniel clenched his jaw. I don't care what she thinks. But she cares what you think. I tilted my head. Has she called you since I left? Silence. That was my answer. A slow, knowing smile tugged at my lips. I had a plan now. Olivia had taken something from me. It was only fair that I returned the favor. I reached for Daniel's hand again, watching the surprise flicker across his face. Do you love me? I whispered. His grip tightened instantly. Yes. I smiled, soft, hesitant. Letting him believe he was winning. Then prove it. His brows furrowed. How? I leaned in, close enough that he could feel my breath against his skin. By helping me destroy her. His entire body went still. He hadn't expected that. Good. Because I wasn't playing by the rules anymore. And this was just the beginning. Daniel's breath hitched. He stared at me as if I had just become someone he didn't recognize. And maybe, in a way, I had. The woman who once clung to him, who had cried herself to sleep over his betrayal, was gone. In her place stood someone colder. Sharper. I don't understand, he said slowly. I smiled, tilting my head slightly. Yes, you do. He swallowed hard. You want revenge. I want justice. Daniel ran a hand down his face, exhaling shakily. I could see the internal battle playing out in his mind, the guilt, the fear, the temptation. He had already destroyed me. He knew that. The question was, how far would he go to keep from losing me completely? And then, finally, he whispered, "What do you want me to do?" A thrill ran through me. He was mine again. Not in love, not in devotion, but in fear. In desperation. "Olivia took something from me," I murmured, stepping closer, my voice laced with quiet venom. "She played a game she had no right to enter. And now, I want her to lose." Daniel clenched his jaw. "She'll lose me." I let out a soft, amused breath. "You were never hers to begin with." He looked away, shame creeping into his features. "She deserves to know that," I continued, my voice softer now, coaxing. "She deserves to know she was nothing more than a mistake. A distraction. That you regret ever touching her." He let out a sharp breath. "You want me to hurt her?" I tilted my head. Did she hesitate to hurt me? He had no answer for that. I let the silence stretch, let him sit in the weight of it. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." A slow, satisfied smile spread across my lips. The plan was simple. Daniel would meet her. Tell her it was over. That it had never meant anything. He would make her feel as small as she had made me feel. He agreed. And I followed. I watched from a distance as Olivia arrived at the cafe, her long hair tumbling over her shoulders, her lips painted a soft pink. She looked hopeful. Naive. The way I must have looked before I learned better. I stood by the window, unseen, as Daniel leaned forward, his face unreadable. Olivia's expression shifted as he spoke, as the truth unraveled before her eyes. At first, shock. Then, hurt. And finally, humiliation. I could almost hear her sharp intake of breath as she tried to hold herself together. But Daniel didn't stop. He told her exactly what I had whispered in his ear the night before. "You were a mistake." I watched as Olivia's lips trembled, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She looked around, as if the walls of the cafe were closing in on her, as if she suddenly realized that everyone around her knew. I should have felt satisfied. I should have won. But as I watched her break, a strange feeling settled in my chest. This wasn't the victory I thought it would be. Because Olivia wasn't me. She had never made promises to me. She had never vowed to love me, to stay faithful. That had been Daniel. And yet, here I was, trying to punish her while the man who had truly destroyed me sat across from her, delivering the final blow. I had thought that revenge would make me feel powerful. But all it did was make me feel empty. I turned away before Olivia could crumble completely, before Daniel could find me with his eyes. I walked out into the cold air, inhaling deeply, as if I could rid myself of the poison I had been drinking for weeks. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't me. I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. "Daniel, it's done. Where are you?" I looked down at the message, then back at the cafe where I had left him behind. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked. Away from him. Away from her. Away from the version of myself that had needed this revenge so badly. Daniel had lost me a long time ago. But the truth was, I had lost myself too. And it was time to find her again.